So instead, what is offered by Christian commentaries is that Judaism had to step aside. So we're talking basically about replacement theology, supersessionism, what Christians are fond of, or not fond, but commonly taught is that the Old Testament gave way to the New Testament, right? Old Testament is out, New Testament is in, so kind of replacement there, changing of the guards. We could also extend that to people groups so that the people of Israel are being replaced or set aside or put on back burner status, or their program is being mothballed, or whatever analogy that pops into your head, in favor of the Christian church or the Gentile Christians coming on the scenes and being the new people group or the new Israel of God. So the old Israel is out, the new Israel's in. We have the example given by many Christian pastors of the law of Moses is being replaced by the law of Christ. We could also add to that the terms covenant, where we have Christians will often say, I'm not an old covenant Christian, I'm a new covenant Christian. So all of those elements really amount to the same thing, a replacement of something that was existing because it was incompatible. It couldn't handle the theology of what was being presented. And so that's the discussion that we're jumping into. And so in my commentary, what I'm beginning to entertain is this thought of old man, new man, and Messianic Judaism. And what I'm proposing is that instead of having to replace those elements that I mentioned, Judaism and Israel and the law of Moses and the Old Testament, things like that, in favor of the new, instead of replacing them, what if instead Yeshua was simply teaching a radical reformation from the inside out of an individual, so that we don't end up having to replace the systems, we end up reforming them. They are radically changed, but we still retain those systems. We simply infuse them with new meanings, or fulfilled meanings, I should say, not necessarily new meanings, but fulfilled meanings, or what we might call the deeper spiritual meanings, like Yeshua challenged people in his Sermon on the Mount about, you've heard it said, but I tell you, XYZ. And so Yeshua is not replacing the law of Moses. He's actually just bringing it to its fullest expression and giving us the true and proper meaning that had been lost because of all the traditions and the halakha and the policies and the fences and things like that that have been built up over time. In an effort to change the system or change the failing people of God, Yeshua realized that it's not necessary to get rid of the existing people, like the Jews, right? Out with the Jews and in with the Gentiles or something like that. Instead, Yeshua simply came to transform the man. Let's change the man from the inside out. He can still practice his Judaism. He can still be a true Israelite or a loyal Torah keeper. But now he's going to do it with a renewed sense of love for God, because he's filled with the Spirit of God and has faith in the Son of God. So let's pick up my commentary where I left off and see if this reads a little better and if it gives a better sense of the goal of what Yeshua was trying to get at when he brought his. And it was indeed radical, right? We have to recognize it was radical. He had some harsh words to say to those religious leaders in his day. Let's pick it up. This is my own commentary. I say, so in an effort to properly explain Yeshua's teachings on the matter, I believe that we must start with the mainline doctrinal position that only a circumcised heart can receive the words of God, thus bringing that individual in line with the Son of God and the Spirit of God. Notice how I carefully weaved in a little bit of a Trinitarian wording in there. I didn't mention the Father, but Word of God, Son of God, Spirit of God. And what I believe, again, without kind of belaboring this too much, is that Jesus didn't come to replace Judaism. It wasn't really in need of being replaced. Although we could say that there was a form of Judaism that existed in Yeshua's day, kind of an oral tradition. We can call it oral Torah, or the early workings of Talmudic Judaism, Messianic Judaism, even the beginnings of Rabbinic Judaism with Pharisaic Judaism and things like that. A lot of people aren't aware that the different kinds of Judaism that were present in the time of Yeshua don't necessarily equal biblical Judaism. When I say biblical Judaism, I mean, consider that when Moses was given the words of the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai in Exodus chapter 20, and then Moses went on to later write out the rest of the Torah, the books of Genesis through Deuteronomy that we now know as the 5 books. That lifestyle that God described, that God was giving to the people of Israel, right, that he was outlining for them, that he's describing in those pages, that is what I call biblical Judaism. So that the very first generation should have had what we might think of as the purest form. And as time went by, Israel kind of built up all these kind of perverted versions of what God really intended.